Okay, let me start with you, Governor Chea. Prime Minister Hun Sen of Cambodia recently said and described the China-Cambodia relations as strong as steel, echoing a similar term used by the Chinese president. How would you describe the current state of Cambodia's economic and financial relations with China?
Well, first of all, thank you, Guan, for having me on your show. Before I touch on the relationship, let me give a bit of background of Cambodia and where we're coming from. And I know a lot of the Chinese public may have heard about Cambodia, temples and beaches, but not much about our history and our economic development. Cambodia has been through nearly 30 years of civil war. We've had our basic infrastructure destroyed to the ground. We even have our monetary system abolished, where people were reduced to use barter. And so when we achieved partial peace in 1992 and full peace in 1998, that's only when the country really started to develop. And since then, for the last 10 years, we saw growth at about 7% on average, making us one of the fastest growing economy in Cambodia. But of course, COVID has impacted everyone, and our economy has contracted to minus 3.2%, and we're looking forward to a positive recovery in the next year. But back to your questions on the relationship. The Cambodia-China relationship went back to long time ago. Actually, if you have been to one of our temples, or actually many temples, you will see depictions of trade between the Khmer people and the Chinese people back then. And in fact, one of the famous explorer from China, Wang Guan, made his journal was one of the most important witnessing of the life in the kingdom back in the 12th century. And as you also mentioned out, the relationship between our kings, late King Sihanouk and late Premier Chu Enlai in the 60s has also strengthened that relationship. And you're rightly pointing out about the term strong as steel Cambodia-China relationship. We've had bilateral trade with China in 2020. Just to give you some number, trade between the two countries reached about 8.2 billion US dollar, and we expect it to expand to 10 billion in 2023. In terms of investment, we've had about 2.7 billion US dollar from China in 1929. We've also had a lot of developmental assistance from the government of China, particularly in building infrastructure and in the sector of energy and mining. But we've had this China-Cambodia free trade agreement. Hopefully it will be going into full force in 2022, and we look forward to see more relationship between the two countries.
Right, Governor Chea, I'm sure you've heard this as much as I do. Many Western commentators say that Cambodia is, quote unquote, too reliant on China economically, pointing out that China holds nearly half of Cambodia's national debt, as well as the ever-increasing Chinese investment in your country. What will be your response?
Look, as an economist and a trained accountant, I will speak from the number that I have in front of me and not on perception. If you look at the government public debt, Cambodia government public debt, it stands at about 32% of our GDP, and that is well below the threshold set by the IMF. And of course, of that 32%, 45% of the debt is owed to China. But this is a small percentage. Second of all, if you look at investment in China investment in ASEAN, which stand at 14.3 billion US dollar in 2020, Cambodia received 1.2 billion. That is less than 8% of the total investment. So to term us as too reliant, I think it's a bit exaggerated. But let's be fair, that Cambodia is a country that has been ravaged by war. The government role is to develop the country, to create jobs for our people, to reduce poverty, and therefore we welcome investment from any country, from any development partner. And we did receive investment from other countries as well. I mean, in the 90s and the year 2000, we received a lot of assistance from our development partners, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, but we also received assistance from the United Kingdom, from the United States, from Malaysia, and other, South Korea and Japan. But in the last 10 years, we've seen, China investment and developmental assistance taking over those countries. But it's not over to reliant at the moment. And again, as our Prime Minister mentioned, we still welcome whoever want to come to Cambodia. The country is opened.
Fair enough. Also, this week, China and ASEAN elevated their relationship to comprehensive strategic partnership, one of the highest designation of relations cooperation among governments. How do you see that new designation impacting lives and economies in ASEAN and in your country, Cambodia in particular?
Well, I think that on the top of the existing initiative like the RCEP, the ASEAN Free Trade Agreement with China, we also have the Lanchan Mekong initiative for Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam initiative with China, where it helps the CLMV country, we term it, to reduce developmental gap with our neighboring countries. I'm sure that this new strategic comprehensive partnership will deepen the relationship, and especially from the speech of President Xi, there was a clear sort of goal, and it's very promising. He mentions about $1.5 billion in assistance to ASEAN for the next 3 years to recover from COVID. He also mentioned to increase import from ASEAN country worth $150 billion and particularly on agri-products. Now, I want to focus on these agri-products. Cambodia exports about we export to China about 1.2 billion, mostly in agricultural product, but we import about $7 billion from China. So there are room for improvement in terms of mutual trade. But I think in terms of agri-product, and if that is what President Xi mentions, increasing import from ASEAN, focusing on agri-product, I think this is where the opportunity lies for Cambodia, because we have 60% of our people in the farming sector. Cambodia have still a lot of land that has been not yet exploited, and therefore we believe that we can fill that gap with agri-products. And I do believe that China is also looking for reliable suppliers of food, because I'm somebody who loves food, and so I want to make sure that the house is always supplied with food for the children, and this is very important. I believe in these centuries we can talk about a lot of things, but if you don't have food on the table, then there's not much to talk about. So in this regard, I think we can strengthen our relationship.
Indeed, agricultural cooperation can be crucial. Also, we know that Cambodia joined the Belt and Road Initiative since its inception. What do you make of this initiative, the Belt and Road Initiative?
No, I can't talk about other countries, but I can speak for Cambodia that we have a lot benefited from the Belt and Road Initiative, particularly a lot of infrastructure. As I mentioned earlier, the country was ravaged by war. A lot of our basic infrastructure was destroyed. And so with this Belt and Road Initiative, we were able to rebuild roads and bridges. And recently, through the BRI, we are able to we are going to have our first highway from Phnom Penh to Sihanoukville. That is to the great benefit for Cambodia, because Sihanoukville is a port city, and we need that connectivity to improve our logistic costs and of course, trade. So definitely this is something that we have also benefited a lot.
We know Cambodia is stepping up its digital growth. It has recently launched a digital currency called Bac. How has this new digital payment system changed the local currency use and local economy?
Well, Cambodia is a very dollarized economy, and we're still very much reliant on dollars in our economy. 90% of the transactions are done in US dollar. But as a central bank, as an institution that conducts monetary policy, and if you understand it by the word, is that we control, we manage the supply of money. And when we don't have control over the supply or the demand of money, then our monetary policy becomes less effective. And so this is why through this digital currency, it's not a central bank digital currency per se, but it has some feature of it. But through making digital payment more convenient, we hope that people will adopt the usage of local currency even more. And in fact, this is just one of the initiatives to improve the use of local currency. There are many more. We've been working with the PBOC from Wuxi, Guangxi, to have Cambodian local currency listed and allow people to buy directly from the RMB to local currency. We also try to work with a couple of Chinese banks here, namely ICBC and Bank of China, to encourage cross-border trade settlement in local currency, where Cambodia exporter can pay to the Chinese importer in RMB, but in return, the Chinese exporter can pay to Cambodian importer in local currency, Khmer real. So that's how we see we can improve the use of local currency, not by doing things alone, but also have partnerships and support from our partners.
That sounds exciting. And finally, Governor Chea, I know that you're studying Chinese. Actually, you've been studying Chinese for a while. How do you feel personally about increasing people-to-people relations and people-to-people understanding between China and Cambodia?
I think I'm actually learning Chinese for quite a while. So now I do 3 hours a week, and I hope that next time we meet I can talk to you in Chinese. But I think person-to-person relationship is very important, and you rightly pointed out, and I also pointed out about the relationship between our late King Sihanouk and Premier Chu Enlai. That started with a personal relationship, and our Prime Minister Hun Sen and President Xi has also built a great personal relationship. And going forward, I think that's the way we go. We should go. We have, in fact, Cambodian students, there's about 300 Cambodian students graduating from Chinese university per year. That's a lot. And so I think going forward, we also have a lot of Chinese tourism coming to Cambodia. We reached at one point in time 2.5 Chinese tourists. That's how we try to encourage people to see, others from beyond the media headlines. Right? You see people truly for who they are. So I think this is very important, and I have a great friendship with you. So that's how we started it. And I think this is not something to be overlooked.
Thank you very much, Governor Chea. We all know that narratives by media can be misleading sometimes, and people-to-people understanding, nuanced understanding of each other is so important. Thank you for joining us on the Hub here on CGTN. I hope to talk to you again soon and see you again soon after COVID.
Thank you.
Serey.